The Duke married Marianne Vellor because a dead man had ordered him to. And before the wedding candles guttered out, he had already decided to hide her. She came to Thornwyck as a bride, and was received like an illness. By midnight, her husband had given her an east wing chamber, a locked corridor, and one command. She was not to be seen when guests arrived. This was a story of broken vows, quiet rebellion, and a woman who refused to disappear. Rain struck the carriage roof as Marianne pressed one gloved hand to the damp velvet seat and breathed against the ache beneath her ribs. The air smelled of wet leather, horse sweat, and bitter lavender salts. Beyond the glass, Thornwyck Manor rose from the moor like a black ship stranded in mud. No servants waited beneath the portico. Only one man stood at the top of the steps. Duke Lucian Harrowgate wore no wedding smile. His dark coat was buttoned to the throat, and one hand rested on the silver head of a cane he did not need. He watched the carriage stop as though it had delivered a creditor. The coachman lowered the step. Rain touched Marianne's face before her slippers reached the gravel, and her wedding gown drank the mud at the hem. Lucian did not descend. "Your Grace," she said. His gaze moved over her pale face, narrow shoulders, and trembling hand. "Mrs. Vellor," he replied. A wife might have corrected him. Marianne merely lifted her chin behind him. The doors opened. A broad-shouldered gentleman with auburn whiskers leaned against the frame, smiling like a man watching a wager conclude. "Cousin, you might invite her Grace inside before she dissolves." "Percival," Lucian warned, so this was Percival Harrowgate, the cousin named twice in the late Duke's will, and too often in the letters arranging the marriage. He bowed. "Lady Marianne, Thornwyck has endured floods, fire, and one French cook. I trust it shall survive matrimony. Your confidence honors us." His smile sharpened. Lucian looked away first. Inside, the entrance hall smelled of beeswax, damp wool, and old stone. Harrowgate dukes stared down from gilded frames while Marianne stood beneath them, with no dowry and no bloodline grand enough to excuse her presence. The marriage had been performed that morning in a private chapel. 12 witnesses had signed the register. Lucian had spoken his vows clearly, without warmth. Marianne had answered in the same fashion. Neither had asked aloud why the late Duke had made their union a condition of Lucian's inheritance. Neither had discussed the sealed memorandum removed from the will before Marianne could read it. No one had explained why Lucian had gone white when the solicitor mentioned her father's name. A woman in iron-grey silk approached. "Mrs. Pindle, housekeeper, Your Grace." "Show the Duchess to the East Rooms," Lucian said. Mrs. Pindle's eyes flickered. "The East Rooms? They have been prepared." Percival laughed softly. "Prepared is generous." Marianne turned to her husband. "Are those to be my rooms?" "They are private." "Private from whom?" "From interruption." Rainwater slid from her cloak and pooled at her feet. "His Grace values order," Percival said. "Some visitors are easily unsettled by damp corridors, by surprises." Lucian's hand tightened around the cane. There it was. Not shame exactly. Something more deliberate, fear perhaps, but of what? Mrs. Pindle led Marianne through a passage where the air cooled with every step. The carpet faded from crimson to brown. The portraits disappeared. By the time they reached the east wing, even the servants' voices had vanished. A freckled maid waited beside a door with peeling blue paint. "This is Bess Trewin," Mrs. Pindle said. "She will attend you." The chamber held a narrow bed, a cracked washstand, and a fire that smoked more than it burned. Wind slipped through the casement. On the dressing table stood a vase without flowers. Marianne touched the mantle, dust coated her fingertip. "His Grace said the rooms were prepared." "His Grace gave the order this afternoon." Mrs. Pindle replied, "After the vows, then." After he had seen her beside him and decided how far away she ought to be kept. Bess knelt at the hearth. "I can fetch another blanket, Your Grace." "How many servants are assigned here, Miss Trewin?" "Only Miss Trewin, for the present. And my meals, they will be brought." Marianne looked at the single chair, the locked connecting door, and the bell pull cut near the ceiling. "Will I dine with the Duke tomorrow?" Silence answered first. "I could not say." That night, after Bess had banked the fire, and the rain had deepened into a steady roar, Marianne woke to voices beyond the locked connecting door. Percival spoke first. "You cannot keep a duchess in a forgotten wing forever." Lucian's reply was low but clear. "I need only keep her out of sight until the terms are satisfied." And after that, a pause followed, long enough for Marianne to sit upright in the cold bed. "After that," Lucian said, "Thornwyck will never have to see my charity bride again." Marianne remained motionless until their footsteps faded. The phrase had been spoken without anger. That made it worse. Anger might have faded by morning. Contempt had already settled into the stone. At dawn, Bess entered with hot water and a tray holding dry toast, weak tea, and a small brown bottle. "What is that?" Marianne asked. "Dr. Cleeve's cordial, your grace, for your chest." Marianne lifted the bottle and removed the stopper. Laudanum and peppermint rose from it, sweet and medicinal. "How much was I instructed to take?" 20 drops after breakfast. "And who gave the instruction?" Bess's hands stopped over the wash basin. Mr. Percival spoke to the doctor. Marianne replaced the stopper. 10 drops of laudanum could quiet pain. 20 might keep a slight woman sleeping through half the day. "Take it away." Bess glanced toward the door. Mrs. Pindle said, "I shall answer Mrs. Pindle myself." The maid wrapped the bottle in a cloth and hid it beneath the tray. That small act told Marianne more than obedience would have done. A knock followed before either woman could speak again. Lucian entered without waiting for permission. Morning light sharpened the severity of his face, though faint shadows lay beneath his eyes. His gaze moved from the untouched medicine to Marianne's travelling gown. "You are dressed. I had not understood that your command included remaining in bed. It included resting. Rest is more easily achieved when one is not listening to her future being arranged through a wall." Bess lowered her head and gathered the tray. Lucian waited until the door closed behind her. "You heard a private conversation. The lock made it private. The wall did not." His jaw tightened. "Percival speaks carelessly. You did not." The bluntness landed between them. Lucian crossed to the hearth and stirred the grey coals with the poker. "The terms of my grandfather's will require us to remain married for 1 year. You will receive £50 each quarter under the settlement, beyond my control. Your rooms, servants, clothes, and medical expenses will be provided." A wife's pin money was commonly written into a marriage settlement, because without such protection, nearly everything she possessed belonged legally to her husband. Marianne had signed those papers without seeing Lucian once. "You describe a pensioner," she said. "I describe security. You describe silence purchased in quarterly installments." The poker struck the grate. "You arrived here with debts, my father's burial account, and 6 months owed to a lodging-house keeper. Debts nevertheless. And you married me to keep Thornwyck." Lucian turned. For the first time, his composure slipped only slightly, a whitening around the mouth. A glance toward the writing desk in the adjoining chamber. Marianne noticed both. On that desk lay a thick document beneath a brass weight. The Harrowgate seal was visible at its edge, but another sheet had been placed over the signatures, an unfinished business, or a concealed one. Lucian moved into the doorway, blocking her view. "You will not enter my rooms." "Then lock the door properly." His eyes dropped to the cut bell pull and the cracked plaster above her bed. Something resembling shame passed across his face before discipline erased it. "I shall have repairs ordered. I require no favours. It is not a favour, no. It is maintenance, like the roof and the horses." A muscle shifted in his cheek. "You may resent the marriage," Lucian said, "but public defiance will serve neither of us." "You need not fear public defiance, your grace. You have already ensured there will be no public." He had no answer ready for that. Marianne walked to the window. Far below, 2 grooms led a black stallion across the rain-darkened yard. The animal fought the rains, striking sparks from the stones, while both men struggled to keep their feet. One groom raised a whip. The stallion reared. Marianne's palm flattened against the cold glass. Behind her, Luge said, "That horse has broken 3 men. Do not go near him." She watched the animal wrench free, scattering servants across the yard. Then the stallion lifted its head toward the east wing window and became perfectly still. By breakfast, the entire household knew that the black stallion had quieted beneath Marianne's window. No one, and said so plainly. Thornwyck's servants had perfected the art of carrying news behind lowered eyes and closed mouths. Yet, as Marianne entered the smaller breakfast parlour, conversation stopped so sharply that the silver spoon in Mrs. Pindle's hand struck the teapot. Percival sat at the head of the table, though the place belonged to Lucian. He unfolded his newspaper with leisurely precision. "Your Grace," he said, "how brave of you to join us." Marianne looked at the empty chair beside Lucian's untouched place. "I was told the family breakfasted here. The family does." The insult hung in the steam above the coffee. Mrs. Pindle placed a plate before Marianne without meeting her gaze. The eggs were cold. The toast had been burned on one side and scraped black on the other. Percival watched her examine it. A delicate appetite is expected in a delicate lady. I have found hunger remarkably indifferent to rank. The footman at the wall smothered a reaction. Percival's eyes moved to him, and the young man stiffened. Servants at a great estate could be dismissed without reference, and lose not only wages but lodging, livery, and any hope of another respectable household. Percival needed no raised voice to make the threat understood. Marianne ate the burnt toast. Later that morning, 3 neighbouring ladies called at Thornwyck. Their cards arrived on a silver salver, but Mrs. Pindle carried them directly to Percival. Lady Brantham, Mrs. Colfax, and Miss Sorrel, the housekeeper announced. Marianne rose from the window seat. "Please show them into the blue drawing-room." Percival did not look up from his correspondence. "They have come to see Lucian. The Duke is riding. Then they will leave their cards." A murmur of feminine voices drifted from the entrance hall. One laugh rose above the others. "Is she truly here?" Percival folded his letter. "Her health is too uncertain for callers," he said, through the half-open door. "The marriage has been a great strain upon her." Marianne crossed the room before Mrs. Pindle could close it. Lady Brantham stood beneath the chandelier in violet silk, her gaze fixing upon Marianne's plain morning gown. Mrs. Colfax looked quickly toward Percival, as if uncertain whether the woman before her should be acknowledged. Marianne inclined her head. "Lady Brantham, Mrs. Colfax, Miss Sorrel." Lady Brantham's smile barely moved. "Your Grace, we were told you were resting. I have rested sufficiently." Percival stepped between them with practiced ease. "The physician insists she avoid excitement." "I should not wish to endanger the Duchess by remaining," Lady Brantham replied. They left within 2 minutes. The front door closed. No one spoke. Marianne turned to Percival. "You will not use my health as an excuse to make me invisible." "It is not an excuse." His voice had lost its amusement. "It is the arrangement." She met his gaze until he looked away. That afternoon, Bess brought coal to the east wing with a split lip. Marianne set aside her sewing. "Who struck you?" "No one, Your Grace." "Then Thornwyck's door frames have grown fists." Bess pressed her mouth closed. A mud-stained envelope protruded from beneath the coal scuttle. Marianne drew it free before the maid could stop her. The letter was addressed to His Grace, the Duke of Harrowgate. 3 broken wafers showed it had been opened and resealed badly. "Where did you find this?" "In the servants' passage." Mr. Percival ordered it burned. A sound came from the corridor. Both women went still. Footsteps paused outside the door, then continued. Marianne broke the seal. The paper inside was covered in several hands. Some signatures were only crosses. The first lines pleaded for fever bark, broth, and dry blankets. Fever had spread among the western cottages after the floods spoiled the wells. 2 children could no longer stand. An old woman had died 3 nights earlier. At the bottom, one sentence had been underlined twice. 28 families remained beyond the western moor, and no relief had reached them in 17 days. Marianne read it again. Then she folded the petition and placed it inside her sleeve. "Who carries messages from the western cottages?" Bess stared at her. "No one now, Your Grace. The lower road is under water." "Then I shall require boots." Mud sucked at Marianne's borrowed boots, as she and Bess crossed the western sheep path beneath the sky the colour of pewter. The rain had weakened to a cold mist, but water still streamed through the heather and gathered in every hollow. Marianne's cloak clung to her shoulders. Each breath scraped beneath her ribs, yet she kept her pace steady, while Thornwyck's chimneys faded behind them. "The lower road would have been easier," Bess said. "The lower road is watched." Bess looked back toward the manor. "If Mr. Percival learns I brought you, he will say I ordered you. That may not save me." Marianne stopped beside a stone wall and faced her. The bruise beneath Bess's split lip had darkened. "Then you may return." The maid tightened her shawl. "And leave you to lose yourself on the moor. I have already been lost in Thornwyck." Bess's mouth twitched despite the cold. "This way, your grace." The first cottage appeared beyond a stand of wind-bent ash trees. Its thatch sagged beneath the rain, and a rag had been stuffed into the broken window. No smoke rose from the chimney. Marianne knocked. A child opened the door. He could not have been more than 7. His bare feet were blue with cold, and his shirt hung from one shoulder. Behind him, a woman lay curled beneath 2 coats on a straw mattress, shivering so violently that the wooden bedstead struck the wall. "We have nothing for the rent," the boy whispered. "I have not come for rent." His eyes moved to Marianne's cloak clasp and widened. Bess crouched beside him. "This is her grace." The child stepped back, as though the title itself might punish him. Inside, the cottage smelled of damp ash, sweat, and spoiled water. Marianne knelt beside the woman and touched 2 fingers to the side of her neck. The skin burned beneath her glove. "When did the fever begin?" 6 days, the woman breathed. "Maybe 7. Has the estate surgeon attended you?" A dry laugh became a cough. "No surgeon crosses for the likes of us." On the table stood a chipped cup containing black sediment. Bess lifted it and grimaced. "Willow bark," she said. "For pain," Marianne replied. "Not for this fever." Powdered Peruvian bark was sometimes given for recurring fevers, though its bitterness was so severe that physicians mixed it with wine, treacle, or spice. There was none in the cottage. There was scarcely enough flour for another loaf. A bell rang outside, not a church bell. A handbell struck 3 times from farther along the row. The boy's face changed. "Another one," he said. They found 5 more sufferers in the next 2 cottages. An infant lay too quiet against its mother's chest. An old labourer stared at the ceiling, unable to recognize his own daughter. A girl of 12 had wrapped wet cloth around her father's wrists because no one had shown her what else to do. Marianne removed her gloves and began working. She boiled water, opened shutters, and ordered the spoiled well bucket covered. She sent Bess from door to door, counting the sick, the children, and the remaining food. By the 7th cottage, the number had reached 19. A folded letter rested unopened on the mantelpiece, marked with Lucian's name and the Thornwyck seal. Marianne reached for it. The tenant woman caught her wrist. "Do not." "Why?" "They will know we wrote again." "Who will?" The woman looked toward the door. Hoofbeats sounded on the ridge above the cottages. Bess extinguished the lamp with her fingers. Darkness closed over them while the horse passed slowly along the path, its rider hidden by the rain. No one breathed until the sound faded. "They have made fear part of the rent," Marianne said. At the final cottage, an elderly man named Gideon Marsh sat beside a cold hearth with both hands wrapped around an empty medicine bottle. He examined Marianne's face for a long moment. "You are the new Duchess." "I am." "Then you have come too late." He placed the bottle in her palm. A Thornwyck inventory mark had been scratched into the glass. "This belonged to the estate dispensary," Marianne said. "Aye, 40 bottles came last month. Bark, laudanum, fever powders. Paid for under the old Duke's poor account." "Where are they?" Gideon's thumb rubbed against the bottle's worn label. "Mr. Percival sent them to market." Bess went still. Gideon leaned closer, his voice no louder than the rain against the roof. "He has been selling the poor man's medicine in Belminster for 6 weeks. Marianne closed her fingers around the empty bottle. If Gideon spoke the truth, the fever had not merely been neglected, it had been fed for profit. Vesper's stall smelled of hot iron, wet straw, and blood. The black stallion struck the door with both forehooves as Marianne entered the stable yard, sending a tremor through the timber walls. A groom carrying oats dropped the bucket. Another crossed himself before retreating behind a post. "Your Grace, stand back." The warning came from a thick-set man with silver in his beard and a leather brace around his left wrist. Stablemaster Amos Pike planted himself between Marianne and the stall. She drew the empty medicine bottle from her cloak. "I require a horse, then you require any horse but that one." Behind the barred door, Vesper wheeled. Foam flecked his bitless mouth, and a dark welt ran across his flank where someone had used a whip. Marianne's gaze remained on the mark. "Who struck him?" Amos glanced toward the younger grooms. "No one who will admit it." "He threw Barrow into a wall last week," one groom said. "Broke 2 ribs." "He broke Mr. Pell's collarbone before that," another added. "And the third man?" Marianne asked. Amos flexed his braced wrist. "You are looking at him." Vesper charged the door again. The sound silenced the yard. "He will kill someone," the first groom whispered. "No," Marianne said. "Someone has taught him to expect pain." Amos studied her mud-streaked hem and colourless face. "With respect, Your Grace, fine judgments will not stop 1,200 pounds of horseflesh. A valuable stallion might be insured, sold for stud, or destroyed if judged dangerously vicious. The decision belonged to the owner, but no respectable stablemaster wished to admit that brutality had ruined an animal worth more than several cottages." "Open the outer gate," Marianne said. Amos stared at her. "Absolutely not. I did not ask you to release him." She removed her gloves and approached the bars. Vesper flattened his ears. His nostrils widened as he caught her scent. Rain, smoke, fever cottages, and the bitter trace of the empty medicine bottle still in her hand. Marianne stopped beyond the reach of his teeth. "You have no cause to trust me," she murmured. "That makes 2 of us." The stallion tossed his head. From the tack room came the scrape of a drawer and the faint crackle of paper. One of Percival's men had been searching there since dawn, claiming to inspect the estate's feed accounts. Through the half-open door, Marianne saw a sealed letter lying beneath a riding crop, addressed to a Belminster apothecary. Amos noticed where she was looking. His expression hardened. "Not here," he said under his breath. The tackroom door shut. Marianne turned back to Vesper. "Bring me an apple." A groom hesitated before obeying. She took the fruit, cut it with a small knife, and placed half on the ground outside the stall rather than offering it from her palm. Nothing happened. Rain drummed on the stable roof. Marianne waited. Her breathing grew shallow, but she kept her shoulders loose. Vesper's ears shifted forward, then back. He stepped once, stopped, and lowered his head enough to smell the apple through the bars. "He will lunge," Amos warned. Marianne remained still. Vesper came closer. His muzzle passed between the bars. One groom gasped. Marianne kept her hand at her side while the stallion ate, his teeth crushing the fruit with a wet snap. Then he lifted his head and looked directly at her. A horse's trust could not be commanded. It could only be given. Marianne raised her bare hand by inches. Vesper trembled beneath the skin. His breath warmed her wrist. For one terrible moment, his teeth hovered near her fingers. Then the great black head descended. His forehead rested against her palm. No one in the stable spoke. Amos approached slowly, disbelief stripping the sternness from his face. "He has never done that." Marianne ran her thumb along the white star hidden beneath Vesper's forelock. Perhaps no one waited long enough. The tackroom latch clicked behind them. Amos guided her away. Before the door opened, Percival's clerk emerged with the sealed letter tucked beneath his coat. Amos lowered his voice until only Marianne could hear. "Never let Mr. Percival learn what that horse will do for you." "Why?" His gaze followed the clerk across the yard. "Because Vesper is the one thing on this estate he has never been able to master." 40 voices filled Thornwyck's great drawing room, yet the room fell silent when Marianne entered. Wet wool steamed beside the fire. Beeswax candles warmed the scent of polished mahogany, spiced wine, and rain carried in on gentlemen's boots. County magistrates, clergymen, neighbouring landowners, and their wives stood beneath the painted Harrowgate ancestors. gathered to discuss the floods that had swallowed 3 roads and ruined half the autumn grain. Marianne wore a plain dove-grey gown. The empty medicine bottle rested inside her sleeve, pressing against her wrist with every step. Lucian stood near the long windows beside Reverend Holt and Sir Edgar Bellasis. His expression changed when he saw her. Not surprise, but calculation. Percival reached her first. "Your Grace," he murmured. "The physician advised seclusion. The physician has not examined me. He has examined your history, and I have examined Thornwyck's cottages." His smile vanished. Lucian crossed the room before Percival could answer. "Marianne, a word." "No, Your Grace." Several guests turned openly now. Marianne drew the folded tenant petition from her sleeve and held it out. Mud stained its edges. 28 families beyond the western moor have been without proper food or medicine for 17 days. Fever has reached at least 19 people. Sir Edgar frowned. "We were informed that the western cottages had received supplies. They received nothing." Percival gave a soft, regretful sigh. "My cousin's wife has been unwell since arriving. Fever can produce confusion, particularly in a constitution already weakened." Marianne placed the empty bottle beside the petition on the nearest table. "This bears Thornwyck's dispensary mark. It was found in a tenant's cottage after the remaining medicines were sold in Belminster." A murmur moved through the room. Lucian picked up the bottle. His thumb passed over the scratched crest, but he did not look at Percival. "Who told you this?" "Gideon Marsh." "A labourer with 3 convictions for poaching," Percival said. "He is also a man whose neighbours are dying." The blunt words stopped the whispers. Reverend Holt stepped nearer. "If there is fever beyond the moor, the parish overseers must be notified. Relief is funded through the poor rate, but supplies cannot be distributed if roads are impassable." "They were passable 6 days ago," Marianne replied. "The petitions were hidden before the flooding worsened." Lucian's gaze lifted to hers. "You went there yourself?" "Yes." "Without permission?" "I was unaware compassion required a husband's license." A lady near the hearth lowered her fan. Percival's eyes sharpened with satisfaction. Marianne had given him exactly the spectacle he wanted. Lucian spoke quietly. "This gathering concerns estate administration and county relief. You are not sufficiently acquainted with either." "I am acquainted with cold children and empty cupboards." "You are also frequently ill." The room seemed to contract. Lucian set the bottle down. "Your health makes you unsuitable for such exertion. You will return to the East Wing and leave these matters to those capable of managing them." Marianne's fingers tightened around the seam of her gown. For one breath, she searched his face for doubt, for any sign that he had heard more than Percival's careful lies. There was none. Whatever hope she had carried into the room ended there. She drew the petition from beneath Lucian's hand. "You have mistaken obedience for incapacity, Your Grace." A footman entered carrying a silver tray. On it lay an unopened letter bearing the seal of a Belminster apothecary, and a demand for payment within 7 days. Percival intercepted it before Lucian could read the address. The front doors crashed open. A small boy stumbled into the hall, soaked from hair to boots. Mud covered his knees, and blood ran from a cut above his brow. Bess rushed forward. "Tom Rudge?" The child swayed but remained standing. "The Western Bridge," he gasped. "It is gone." Lucian moved toward him. "Where are the tenants? Other side, Your Grace." "All of them." "And the fever?" Tom looked past Lucian and found Marianne. "Mrs. Marsh says the baby will not last until morning." Thunder rolled over the roof. The boy's next words came through chattering teeth. "No cart can cross. No doctor can reach us." Marianne turned toward Percival. His hand still covered the apothecary's unopened demand. "Then," she said, "we shall begin with the medicine you locked away." The key turned inside Percival's office before Marianne reached the door. He had left the drawing room while the guests crowded around the drenched child, moving quickly enough to betray what his composed face concealed. Marianne followed him through the library passage, with Bess and Tom close behind. "Remain here," Marianne told them. Bess caught her sleeve. "Your Grace, he will not give it willingly." Then he may refuse me to my face. Marianne opened the office door without knocking. The room smelled of sealing wax, damp paper, and the sharp sweetness of spilled laudanum. Percival stood beside a black oak medicine chest, reinforced with iron bands. One hand rested upon its lid, the other held a ring of keys. Several bottles had already been wrapped in brown paper. "You have developed a disagreeable habit of entering private rooms," he said. "These medicines belong to Thornwyck's tenants. They belong to the estate. An estate is not merely its walls. It is land, income, and obligations. Matters you are scarcely equipped to understand." Marianne crossed the carpet and placed Gideon Marsh's empty bottle on his desk. Beside it lay 3 petitions bearing broken seals, each addressed to Lucian. She recognized the mud-smeared handwriting from the cottages. "How many did you hide?" Percival slipped the keys into his waistcoat pocket. "Enough to prevent panic. People are already dying. Poor people are always dying." The words stopped the room cold. Rain rattled against the windows. Somewhere beyond the corridor, Tom began coughing into his sleeve. Marianne lifted the top petition. It had been received 21 days earlier, long before the bridge collapsed. A second requested dry bedding after floodwater entered 6 cottages. The third bore the names of 2 children now sick with fever. "You knew," she said. "I knew the western cottages would consume more than they produced this quarter, and you sold the medicine. I recovered a fraction of the expense." The chest contained laudanum, fever bark, calomel powders, bandages, and spirits of camphor. Such supplies were often kept beneath 2 locks in great houses, partly because laudanum could be bought freely from an apothecary, and partly because a careless dose might silence a patient permanently. Marianne held out her hand, the key. Percival's gaze dropped to her open palm. "No." She seized the brass fire poker from beside the grate. His amusement returned. "Do you intend to strike me?" Marianne brought the poker down against the chest's smaller lock. Metal cracked against metal, once, twice. On the third blow, the iron clasp bent. Percival caught her wrist before she could strike again. His fingers tightened until the poker fell to the carpet. "You mistake recklessness for courage," he said, "and you mistake silence for permission." The office door opened behind them. Lucian stood on the threshold. Rain darkened light at his back. His eyes moved from Percival's hand on Marianne's wrist to the damaged chest and the opened petitions. "Release her." Percival obeyed at once. Marianne rubbed the red marks on her skin. "Ask him why the medicine was packed for Belminster." Lucian looked at the brown paper parcels. Percival stepped away from the chest. "I was correcting waste. The western farms have not paid full rents in 2 seasons. Because the floods ruined their crops," Marianne said. "And because charity teaches men to expect rescue." Tom's thin voice came from the corridor. "My mother paid." Percival's expression hardened. The child stood beside Bess, water still dripping from his hair. In both hands he held the unopened apothecary's demand that Percival had dropped in the drawing room. Lucian took it from him and broke the seal. The amount due was written plainly. £46, 8 shillings, for medicines purchased under Thornwyck's poor account. Beneath it appeared a notation confirming that most of the same stock had been resold through a Belminster broker. Lucian read the page twice. Marianne waited for him to speak. Percival spoke first. "You should consider your wife's conduct before accepting the fantasies of tenants and servants. She has wandered through flooded fields while ill, broken into a locked office, and threatened a gentleman with an iron bar. I threatened the lock. A distinction a physician may not share." He turned to Marianne, all pretense of civility gone. "Continue making accusations, and I shall obtain statements regarding your fevers, your agitation, and your dangerous behavior. A husband may be persuaded that confinement is kinder than scandal." Lucian's face became unreadable. Percival leaned close enough that Marianne smelled clove and brandy on his breath. "Speak again, Your Grace, and I will have you declared unfit before the week is out." Marianne looked past him to Lucian. The next choice belonged to her husband. Lucian's silence lasted only seconds. but Marianne felt each one settle like another bolt across the east wing door. Rain beat against Percival's office windows. The broken medicine chest stood between them, its bent clasp hanging loose, while the petitions lay open beneath Lucian's hand. "Leave us," he said at last. Percival adjusted his cuff. "You cannot mean to question me on the word of a woman who entered my office armed. Leave us." For once, the cousin obeyed. His shoulder brushed Marianne's as he passed, and his quiet laugh followed him into the corridor. Lucian closed the door. Marianne placed the 3 petitions in order by date. The first was delivered 21 days ago. The second names the cottages flooded along the western boundary. The third asks for the medicines your estate had already purchased. I can read, then read signatures. I have Gideon Marsh, Martha Rudge, Abel Sykes. 28 households placed their names or marks upon those pages. Lucian pressed his fingertips against the desk. "Percival says you found them after becoming distressed." They were inside his office. He says they were drafts. The seals were broken. He says you opened them. Marianne's hand went still over the final page. Outside, the departing guests called for carriages beneath the portico. Wheels ground through the flooded gravel while Thornwyck emptied itself of witnesses. "You saw the apothecary's demand," she said. "I saw an unpaid account. It confirms the medicines were resold. It confirms that goods changed hands. It does not prove Percival arranged it. His clerk carried a letter to the Belminster apothecary. Amos Pike saw it. Then Amos may speak to me. He will lose his position if Percival learns he has spoken." Lucian's mouth tightened. Every answer leads to another accusation, because every door in this house appears to open onto one. He turned away and poured brandy into a glass. His hand was steady until the decanter touched the rim and struck it once. Marianne noticed. "Why do you fear believing me?" Lucian faced her. "I fear acting upon claims that cannot yet be proved. A child crossed a flooded moor to tell you people are trapped, and I have sent men to assess the bridge. Men who will return when the light fails and say it cannot be crossed. What would you have me do? Risk servants in a river because you demand a spectacle?" Her breath caught, but her voice remained low. "I would have you remember they are not servants when fever reaches their children." A knock sounded from the adjoining passage. Neither answered. Something slid beneath the door, a sealed note marked for Lucian in the house surgeon's hand. He looked at it but made no move to pick it up. Marianne bent and retrieved it. "Do not open that." She held it out to him. "Then you open it." He broke the seal and read. "What does it say?" "That Dr. Cleeve considers your conduct consistent with nervous agitation brought on by exhaustion." The words were too clean, too convenient. A physician required little more than a husband's authority and another gentleman's support to recommend that a troublesome woman be confined for her own welfare. No court hearing was necessary if her family agreed, or if she had no family powerful enough to object. Marianne looked toward the locked medicine chest. Percival had prepared more than an excuse. He had prepared a cage. Lucian folded the note. "You need rest. Is that your answers? You are ill. I am standing. You have been coughing since you arrived. I have also been correct." His gaze flickered toward the petitions. Marianne stepped closer. "Say it plainly, Lucian. Do you believe I invented sick children, hidden letters, and stolen medicine because a fever disturbed my mind?" He did not meet her eyes. That was answer enough. A small movement passed through her face, gone before he could name it. She gathered the petitions, the apothecary's account, and the empty bottle into her arms. "Where are you going? To do what you will not. I forbid you to leave the house." Marianne paused at the door. "You hid me because you thought weakness made me obedient. Percival threatened me because he thought fear would do the rest." She looked back at her husband. "You were both wrong." Thunder cracked above the manor, shaking dust from the ceiling, then running footsteps struck the corridor. Bess appeared, white-faced and breathless, with Tom Rudge clinging to her hand. "Your Grace," she said. A message came from the western cottages. Tom's lips trembled. "The Marsh baby has stopped drinking," he whispered. They say she will not live through the night. Marianne tightened her hold on the medicine account. Lucian reached for her arm. She was already moving toward the stables. The stable doors groaned beneath the wind as Marianne entered, carrying enough medicine to condemn Percival twice over. Bess followed, with the open chest's smaller bottles packed inside a leather saddlebag. Fever bark, laudanum, camphor, clean linen, and 2 jars of preserved broth struck against one another with every hurried step. Rain blew through the yard in silver sheets, soaking Marianne's hair before Amos Pike dragged the doors shut behind them. "No horse can take the western road," Amos said. "The lower track is under 3 feet of water and the ridge path is breaking apart. Then we shall not use the road." Every groom in the stable looked toward Vesper's stall. The black stallion moved behind the bars, restless but silent. His hooves pressed deep hollows into the straw. A fresh saddle hung nearby, though no one had touched it since the last rider left Thornwyck with his arm bound to his chest. Lucian entered with Percival behind him. "Marianne." Lucian's voice carried across the stable. "Return to the house." She continued fastening the medicine bag. "I have sent for Dr. Cleeve. He cannot cross the bridge. My men are searching for another route. The child is dying now." Percival removed his wet gloves finger by finger. "This display has gone far enough. You can scarcely climb the east wing stairs without losing your breath." Marianne pulled the buckle tight. "Then you should be grateful I have no intention of carrying the horse." A groom coughed to hide a startled laugh. Lucian stepped nearer. Rain shone on his shoulders. "Take Brutus or the grey mare if you insist upon riding as far as the river. Vesper is forbidden." "Brutus refused the flooded ford yesterday," Amos said. "The grey has a swollen fetlock. What of the chestnut?" "Lamb." Lucian looked along the stalls. "Then one of the carriage horses. They are too heavy for the moor." Marianne replied. Percival's clerk appeared at the stable entrance, clutching an unopened letter beneath his coat. Marianne recognized the Belminster apothecary's seal. The clerk caught Percival's eye, then slipped the letter into his waistcoat. Proof was leaving Thornwyck, but a child was running out of time. Marianne faced Amos. "Open Vesper's stall." "No." The answer came from Lucian. Marianne looked at him. "Your permission ceased to matter when you chose Percival's comfort over 28 families." His face tightened. "This is not courage. It is self-destruction." "No, Your Grace." She lifted the saddlebag. "This is consequence." Amos unlocked the stall. Vesper surged forward until the chain across the opening snapped taut. 2 grooms recoiled. Percival moved behind Lucian, his expression sharpening as the stallion's gaze fixed upon Marianne. "Send her back to her room," Percival said, "before she gets herself killed in front of the servants." Marianne entered the stall. Bess whispered her name. Vesper's breath came fast against Marianne's cheek. Rainwater ran from her sleeves and dripped into the straw. She placed one hand beneath his jaw and waited until the stallion's trembling eased. In cavalry stables, horses were sometimes trained to lower themselves so an injured rider could mount without a stirrup. It required absolute trust. Vesper had never been taught the command, but Marianne had watched the way he folded one foreleg when resting after pain. She touched his shoulder. Down. Nothing happened. Percival laughed. Marianne kept her hand in place. "Down, Vesper." The stallion's ears shifted toward her voice. Lucian moved to the stall opening. "Marianne, come out." She ignored him. Vesper lowered his head. One foreleg bent beneath him, then the other. His immense body descended into the straw until he rested before her like a creature offering allegiance. The stable went silent. He chose her. Marianne secured the medicine bag behind the saddle and placed her boot in the stirrup. Vesper rose beneath her in one smooth, powerful motion. Lucian seized the bridle. "You cannot cross that bridge." Marianne looked down at his hand. "There is no bridge left to cross." Recognition altered his face. His fingers loosened. She meant to jump the river. Amos threw open the stable doors. Wind and rain burst inside as Vesper poured the stones, eager for release. Lucian stepped in front of them. "You will not go alone." Marianne gathered the reins. "That choice was made when you refused to stand beside me." Vesper lunged into the storm, carrying her toward the shattered western bridge. Before Lucian could stop her, rain struck Marianne's face so fiercely that each drop felt like thrown gravel. Vesper tore across Thornwyck's flooded pasture, his black body stretching beneath her, while mud burst from his hooves. Marianne bent low over his neck, one hand gripping the reins, and the other pressed against the medicine bag as it hammered behind the saddle. The manor vanished into the storm. Ahead, the western moor rolled beneath sheets of water. Ditches had become streams. Streams had become brown, racing channels that dragged branches, fencing, and drowned sheep through the heather. Vesper did not hesitate. "Steady," Marianne breathed. The stallion's ears turned toward her voice. He shortened his stride before the first flooded hollow, gathered himself, and cleared it with such force that Marianne's breath left her chest. Pain tightened beneath her ribs. She swallowed it. The marsh baby had stopped drinking. That fact mattered more than breath. Behind her, a stable bell rang through the rain once, twice, 3 times. The alarm carried faintly across the estate, followed by the distant thunder of another horse. Marianne looked back and saw a rider descending the ridge, Lucian. He rode the broad bay carriage horse, driving it harder than the heavy animal could safely bear. His coat streamed behind him, and he raised one arm as though his command might cross the distance between them. "Marianne." The storm swallowed half her name. She faced forward. A woman riding at speed would ordinarily have used a side saddle, fitted with a leaping head to secure her legs. Amos had given Marianne a groom's flat saddle instead. It offended every rule of propriety, but if Vesper fell in the flood, she would not be trapped beneath him. The moor dipped sharply. Water reached Vesper's knees. He plunged through it, snorting as the current struck his chest. Marianne's boots filled with icy water. A floating fence rail spun toward them, and she pulled the stallion left barely before it swept past. The medicine bag shifted. Glass struck glass. One bottle broke with a muffled crack. Marianne reached behind her, tightened the strap, and felt liquid soaking through the leather. Camphor, perhaps. Laudanum would have smelled sweeter. She could not stop to learn which hope had shattered. Lucian gained ground on the firmer ridge above her. "Turn back," he shouted. "There is no time. The bridge is gone." "I know." His face changed when he understood she had known from the beginning. Vesper climbed from the flood and reached the old boundary path. Beyond the next rise lay the river. Even before Marianne saw it, she heard it. The water roared through the valley like cannon fire. The western bridge had once been a narrow stone arch built for carts and sheep. Now half the parapet had vanished. The central span sagged above a churning mass of branches and black water. On the far bank, figures gathered beneath lanterns. Someone waved a white cloth. "Your Grace," a man called. Marianne recognized Gideon Marsh's voice. The bridge was not entirely gone. A broken tongue of stone still reached from the Thornwyck side toward the center, though cracks ran through it and water burst between the joints. Lucian's bay stopped at the top of the rise. "Marianne, wait." She drew Vesper to a halt several yards from the bridge. The stallion's sides heaved. Rain ran over his eyes and down the white star beneath his forelock. Marianne laid one palm against his neck. Across the river, a woman screamed. "The baby!" Gideon lifted a lantern. "She is failing." Lucian dismounted behind Marianne and approached with both hands open. "The remaining arch will not hold," he said. "Give me the medicines. We shall lower them by rope at first light." "She has no first light." "You cannot make that distance." Marianne looked across the broken span. The gap was wider than any training fence. The landing stones were slick, narrow, and already crumbling at the edge. Lucian reached for Vesper's bridle. The stallion bared his teeth. "Marianne," Lucian said, and fear stripped the title from his voice. "Do not make me watch you die." She turned in the saddle. "You watched them die for weeks." The words struck harder than the rain. Then the bridge groaned. A deep crack split the air beneath them. The remaining stones shifted under Vesper's hooves, dropping several inches toward the river. Lucian sprang backward as part of the parapet broke away and vanished into the flood. There was no safe ground left behind them. Marianne gathered the reins, fixed her eyes on the far bank, and pressed her heels against Vesper's sides. Now! The stallion surged forward as the bridge collapsed beneath him. For one suspended instant, Marianne heard nothing, not the river, not Lucian's shout, not even Vesper's breath beneath her. The stallion stretched over the black water as broken stone fell behind them. Rain struck Marianne's closed eyes. The medicine bag tore against the saddle, and one loose buckle whipped across her wrist. Then Vesper's forehoofs struck the far bank. His hind legs slipped. Marianne pitched forward, fingers buried in his mane as mud collapsed beneath them. Vesper fought upward with a violent heave, dragging them beyond the crumbling edge, before the last stones vanished into the river. Hands seized the bridle. Gideon Marsh and two labourers pulled Vesper onto firm ground, while Marianne slid from the saddle. Her knees folded when her boots touched earth, but she caught the stirrup and forced herself upright. Across the river, Lucian stood among the ruins of the bridge. He looked smaller from the far bank, powerless. He had hidden his sickly bride from society because he believed her too weak to bear his name. Now he could only watch as she carried his duty where he had failed to take it. "Where is the child?" Marianne demanded. Gideon pointed toward the nearest cottage. With her mother, the saddlebag had split along one seam. Camphor soaked the leather, but the fever bark, clean linen, broth, and two laudanum bottles remained tacked. Marianne lifted the bag against her chest and ran. Inside the cottage, heat and sour sickness thickened the air. Mrs. Marsh sat on the floor with an infant limp against her breast. A candle burned beside a bowl of cold water. "She has stopped breathing." The words emptied the room. Marianne dropped to her knees and placed two fingers beneath the child's jaw. A pulse fluttered there, weak and uneven. "She breathes," Marianne said, barely. She loosened the infant's wrapping, ordered the shutters opened, and sent Gideon for boiled water. The fever bark was too bitter and dangerous to force upon a child in an uncertain dose, so Marianne cooled the small body with damp linen and touched diluted broth against the infant's lips 1 drop at a time. "Come," she whispered. "You crossed no river. You may leave the difficult work to me." The baby swallowed. Mrs. Marsh made a broken sound and covered her mouth. By midnight, every cottage had received supplies. Marianne moved between beds until her wet gown dried stiff with mud. She counted breaths, changed cloths, measured drops, and marked each patient's condition on the backs of Percival's discarded petitions. A rap came at the cottage door. Gideon entered carrying an oilskin packet recovered from Vesper's torn saddlebag. Water streamed from its edges, but the papers inside remained dry. The apothecary's account was there. So were the hidden petitions. Beneath them lay the unopened Belminster letter Percival's clerk had tried to carry away. Its seal had cracked during the ride, revealing a list of 40 medicine bottles, their resale prices, and the commission promised to P. Harrowgate. Marianne folded the evidence back into the oilskin. Outside, lanterns moved along the northern track. Sir Edgar Bellasis arrived with Reverend Holt and 6 men who had crossed by an upstream shepherd's ford. Lucian came behind them on foot, his coat torn and his face grey with exhaustion. No tenant bowed. Lucian stopped when he saw Marianne standing beside Mrs. Marsh's doorway, Vesper at her shoulder, and 28 families gathered behind her. "Is the child alive?" he asked. For now. His eyes closed briefly. Sir Edgar removed his hat. "Your Grace, the Duke reports grave accusations concerning estate relief." Marianne placed the oilskin packet in the magistrate's hands. "These are the petitions His Grace never received. This is the account he refused to accept as proof. And this letter records who sold the medicines while Thornwyck's tenants begged for them." Sir Edgar read the final page beneath Gideon's lantern. His expression hardened. A county magistrate could issue a warrant upon sworn testimony when fraud and theft were supported by written evidence. Sir Edgar folded the papers carefully and turned to Lucian. "Where is Mr. Percival Harrowgate?" Lucian looked toward the dark manor beyond the river. A bell began ringing from Thornwyck's distant tower. Not an alarm for flood, an alarm for escape. The village mill, groaned as floodwater battered its stone foundations. Lanterns swung above the yard, throwing broken circles of light across the rain. The mill wheels spun too quickly in the swollen current, its wooden paddles striking branches with the sound of splitting bones. Percival's travelling carriage stood beside the loading doors. One horse had already been harnessed. A leather trunk lay open in the mud, spilling shirts, silver candlesticks, and packets of banknotes beneath the rain. Percival seized the reins from his clerk. "Move, you fool!" The horse reared at the flooded track. Sir Edgar rode into the yard with 2 constables behind him. Reverend Holt followed in a cart carrying Lucian, and the Belminster apothecary, a narrow man, whose spectacles had fogged in the wet air. Marianne arrived upon Vesper. The stallion's presence silenced the mill workers. He halted beside the carriage, black coat gleaming beneath the rain, while Marianne looked down at Percival without speaking, his face twisted. "You." Marianne dismounted carefully. Her legs trembled after the river crossing, but she placed one hand against Vesper's shoulder until the weakness passed. Sir Edgar unfolded the oilskin packet. "Percival Harrowgate, you are accused of diverting medicines purchased for Thornwyck's poor account, concealing tenant petitions, and profiting from the resale of estate property. On the word of fever-stricken labourers and a hysterical woman." Lucian stepped from the cart. "Do not speak of her in that manner." Percival laughed. "Now you defend her." Lucian's jaw hardened, but Marianne moved between them before he could answer. "These petitions were found in your locked office," she said. "The Belminster letter records your commission. The bottles bear the estate mark. Marks may be copied." The apothecary removed his spectacles and wiped them with a damp handkerchief. "My signature cannot." Percival's confidence faltered. The man approached Sir Edgar and produced a small daybook from beneath his coat. Apothecaries commonly kept such records listing medicines, purchasers, and debts because payments from large estates might remain outstanding for months. Each entry had been dated and witnessed by a clerk. "I sold 40 bottles to Thornwyck's dispensary," he said. Mr. Harrowgate's agent returned 32 through a broker. Payment was divided, and 5 guineas were sent directly to Mr. Percival Harrowgate. Sir Edgar turned a page. "You will swear to this before any magistrate in the county." Percival looked toward his clerk. The young man stepped away from him. That was when Percival understood. He had no allies left. The sealed letter protruding from the clerk's waistcoat was taken and opened. Inside was notice that Percival's private debt of £700 had fallen due, along with instructions to seize his horses and income if payment failed. Marianne watched the rain dissolve the mud around his polished boots. "You sold medicine to satisfy your creditors," she said. "I protected the estate from useless mouths." A mill worker lunged forward. Reverend Holt caught his arm. Percival pointed at Marianne. She was nothing before this marriage. No fortune, no family of consequence. She should be grateful for the rooms she was given. Marianne drew herself upright. "The rooms you placed me in were neglected. The tenants you abandoned were not." Sir Edgar nodded to the constables. Percival stepped backward. "Lucian, tell them who I am." Lucian's face remained still. "I know precisely who you are. You owe me your title. I managed Thornwyck while you wasted years in London. You stole from those who depended upon it." Percival's eyes sharpened. "And you believed me." The accusation found its mark. Lucian looked toward Marianne, but she was watching the constables remove Percival's purse, keys, and signet ring. Until a formal hearing, Sir Edgar could commit him to the county jail on sworn evidence of fraud and theft. His estate allowance would be suspended, and the magistrate could order the disputed funds held. Percival's position, income, and protection disappeared before the mill wheel completed another turn. As the constables led him toward the cart, he twisted back. "You think they will accept you?" he called to Marianne. "They will praise you tonight and whisper about your blood tomorrow." Marianne placed one hand on Vesper's bridle. "Then they may whisper while obeying my orders." No one laughed. The constables took Percival into the rain. Lucian remained near the mill doors after the others withdrew. His wet coat hung heavily from his shoulders, and there was mud on his knees where he had crossed the shepherd's ford. "I cannot undo what I chose to believe," he said. Marianne looked toward the cottages, where lanterns still burned beside the sick. "No. I can remove Percival from every estate office. I can place the relief accounts under your authority. I can open Thornwyck's doors to you before the county and acknowledge what you did here. That is duty, yes." He accepted the word without defense. Then Lucian held out his hand, though he did not attempt to touch her. "Return to Thornwyck, Marianne. Not to the East Wing, not as the wife I was ordered to marry. Rain ran between them. Return as the woman who will govern it beside me." Marianne looked at his offered hand. "You will not ask me to return in private," she said. "You rejected me before your household and doubted me before the county. You will correct both before the same witnesses." Lucian's outstretched hand lowered. "What would you have me say?" "The truth." His eyes remained on hers. "All of it, all of it." The following afternoon, 40 chairs stood once more inside Thornwyck's great drawing room. The same landowners, clergymen, and neighbouring ladies who had watched Lucian dismiss his wife now faced him beneath the Harrowgate portraits. Marianne stood near the fireplace with Bess at her shoulder. Her borrowed gown had been cleaned, though river mud still darkened the hem beyond repair. Lady Brantham whispered behind her, "Fan." Lucian heard her. He stepped into the centre of the room without notes. "My wife brought evidence of suffering within my estate," he said. "I answered her with contempt. I permitted her health to be used against her, confined her from society, and trusted a thief because believing him required less courage than admitting she was right. No one moved. I failed 28 tenant families. The Duchess of Harrowgate saved them." The title settled differently this time. Lucian turned toward Marianne. "I offer no excuse." The room changed when a duke stood before his dependents and admitted that rank had not made him righteous. Lady Brantham lowered her fan. Lucian continued. "All rent arrears caused by the western floods are suspended for 1 year. Grain will be released from the North Granary, and every damaged cottage will receive timber, coal, and clean bedding." A murmur rose among the estate officers. The steward cleared his throat. "Your Grace, such relief will require nearly £900. Then nearly £900 will be spent. Under many estate arrangements, a landowner could forgive rent or distribute grain at his discretion, though repairs and charitable spending were recorded closely because heirs and creditors might later challenge them as waste. Lucian placed the signed order on the table before Sir Edgar, making the promise both public and difficult to withdraw. He lifted a second document. "From this day, all poor relief, medical supplies, and tenant welfare accounts will require the Duchess's approval." Marianne accepted the paper but did not sign. Lucian's expression tightened. "Is something lacking?" "Yes." The room drew still again. "No servant is to be dismissed for having brought me information concerning the cottages. Amos Pike retains authority over the stables. Bess Trowin receives full wages and protection from retaliation. The Western tenants will elect 2 representatives to review relief distribution." Percival's former clerk stared at the floor. Lucian reached for the pen. "Agreed." Marianne watched him add each condition in his own hand. Only then did she sign. Sir Edgar later discovered that Dr. Cleeve's alarming assessment had been written at Percival's instruction without a proper examination. The physician admitted as much under questioning, withdrew the statement, and lost Thornwyck's patronage. No one again used Marianne's health as evidence against her judgment. An unopened letter waited for her in the library that evening. Its heavy paper bore the seal of the late Duke's solicitor. Lucian recognized it before she spoke. "This concerns the memorandum removed from your grandfather's will," Marianne said. "You will read it aloud." His face lost colour. "Tonight?" "Now." The memorandum revealed no hidden fortune and no secret title. Years earlier, Marianne's father had exposed Percival's theft from another estate. He had possessed the figures, the dates, and the names of the men involved, but no titled gentleman had supported his accusation. Percival ruined his livelihood, and the Vellor family fell into debt. The late Duke had learned the truth too late. He had arranged Marianne's marriage to Lucian, partly to restore what Harrowgate's silence had taken from her, and partly to place someone within Thornwyck who might recognize Percival's methods. Lucian folded the page with unsteady hands. My grandfather knew. He knew what cowardice costs. The words cut cleanly. Marianne returned to Thornwyck's principal chambers that night, but not to Lucian's bed. Her rooms were opened beside the library, where estate maps and relief accounts could be brought to her each morning. Lucian courted her through obedience rather than flowers. He repaired cottages before redecorating the manor. He visited the sick without announcing his arrival. When Marianne's cough returned, he asked what she required, instead of summoning a physician to speak over her. Percival was convicted of fraud and theft. His seized allowance repaid the poor account, and the Belminster broker named every gentleman involved in the resale scheme. Lucian attended the hearing without attempting to lessen his cousin's punishment. When he returned, he brought Marianne no excuses, only the recovered money. 4 months after the flood, carriages crowded Thornwyck's drive beneath a bright winter sky. Lady Brantham, Mrs. Colfax, Sir Edgar, Reverend Holt, and every family from the western cottages gathered before a newly built stone infirmary. Above its doors, covered by a length of blue cloth, waited a carved name. The cloth fell away, and winter sunlight touched the words. The Western Moor, by Marianne, Duchess of Harrowgate. Every soul Thornwyck aunt failed. No title had ever silenced Marianne as completely. Beside her, Lucian kept his hands clasped behind his back. He did not watch the crowd or wait for praise. His eyes remained on her face. "You chose the final words," she said. "I chose the truthful ones." The families from the western cottages stood nearest the entrance. Mrs. Marsh held her recovered daughter against one shoulder, the child round-cheeked and impatient beneath a knitted bonnet. Tom Rudge had grown taller and wore new boots supplied from the estate stores, though one lace had already come loose. Gideon Marsh removed his hat. The movement spread through the crowd until every man stood bareheaded before Marianne. Months earlier, they had bowed because she was a duchess. Now they honored her because they knew what she had done. Reverend Holt offered a blessing, and Sir Edgar unlocked the infirmary doors. Warm air carrying the scents of lime-washed walls, clean linen and dried herbs moved into the cold. Inside stood 12 iron bedsteads, a surgery room, a dispensary, and a small kitchen where broth simmered over a black range. The dispensary register lay open upon a desk. In many charitable infirmaries, poor patients required a subscriber's ticket before receiving treatment. Marianne had refused such a system. Any Thornwyck tenant could enter without permission from a landlord, clergyman, or parish officer. "No one shall prove himself deserving while he is bleeding," she had told the committee. Lucian had signed the rule beneath her words. Lady Brantham approached after the tour, violet feathers trembling above her bonnet. "Your Grace, I fear my first visit to Thornwyck was rather brief." "It was." The lady's smile faltered. Marianne allowed the silence to remain just long enough. "You may stay for tea today," Lady Brantham exhaled. "You are generous." "No, merely practical. The infirmary requires subscribers." By evening, Lady Brantham had pledged 50 guineas. Spring came softly to Thornwyck. New thatch appeared along the western cottages. Drainage ditches carried floodwater away from the wells, and the restored bridge rose upon wider foundations of dressed stone. Marianne reviewed every relief account in the library. Bess, now her personal secretary, read tenant petitions aloud, while 2 elected representatives sat at the same table as the estate steward. No letter disappeared again. Marianne's health improved, though it never became perfect. Some mornings, the ache beneath her ribs forced her to pause halfway down the principal staircase. Lucian learned not to reach for her unless she offered her hand first. On those days, he walked at her pace. He did not ask for forgiveness each time he entered a room. He earned portions of it quietly, by reading every petition, by listening when servants contradicted him, and by appearing at the infirmary during an outbreak of scarlet fever when half the county found reasons to remain elsewhere. At the end of the year required by the late Duke's will, Marianne was legally free to leave with the full settlement promised to her. Lucian placed the relevant papers before her without argument. "The condition has been satisfied," he said. "You owe Thornwyck nothing." Marianne read the document and found no hidden clause, no plea, and no attempt to reduce what belonged to her. "What do you wish me to do?" she asked. "What I wish is no longer the same as what I have the right to demand." She folded the document. That answer mattered more than a declaration. One summer evening, Marianne found him beside the restored Western Bridge, watching Vesper graze among the reeds. "You have missed dinner," she said. "So have you." "I was inspecting the North cottages. I was waiting." He held out a second folded paper. It was the agreement granting Marianne permanent authority over tenant welfare, even if their marriage ended or Lucian died before her. She read the final clause twice. "This cannot be withdrawn." That is the purpose. Marianne folded the document and placed it inside her riding coat. Lucian looked toward the river. "I loved you before I deserved to say it." Her fingers tightened briefly on the reins. "And now? Now I love you without expecting it to purchase anything." Vesper lifted his head as Marianne approached. The great stallion lowered himself without command, allowing her to mount. She looked down at Lucian. "Walk beside me." He smiled, not as a duke granting favor, but as a man receiving one. Lucian mounted the bay and joined her upon the rebuilt bridge. Below them, the river moved calmly between strengthened banks. Beyond it, children ran from the healthy cottages toward the infirmary garden, their voices carrying across the fields. Marianne rode Vesper forward. Lucian remained beside her, neither ahead nor behind. As they reached the far bank, the evening air carried the faint scent of wet stone and crushed lavender. Thank you for staying until the end of Marianne's complete story. A story about a woman dismissed as fragile, who became the strongest protector Thornwyck had ever known. If her journey moved you, please give this video a like. It helps the algorithm carry these dramatic historical romance stories to more viewers who love fierce heroines, humble dukes, and hard-earned redemption. Share this tale with a fellow historical romance lover and subscribe with notifications turned on so you do not miss the next full story of betrayal, courage, and love. Before you leave, tell me in the comments. At what moment did Lucian finally begin to deserve Marianne's forgiveness?